Welcome to the 8 Piece of Work workshop, where we are going to decode your motivation. And if you like it, you can also use it for your team. This recording represents the presentation that we had at the SuperNova Festival, Belgium's biggest and finest innovation and technology event in the Wagenaar in Antwerp in 2025. Now, if you currently have access to a screen, that would be ideal because we'll be going through a QR code later that you can scan so that you can participate actively in the workshop. If, however, you're currently listening in a car or you are outside and you do not have access to a screen, don't worry, I'll be walking you through all of the instructions as well. Now, for the curious souls amongst us, before we begin, if you immediately want to know what the 8 pieces of work are, well, luckily for you, I can share them immediately. They are pay, progression, prestige, people, products, personal, policy, and power. But if you want to know more in depth what they are, where they come from, why they exist, and how you can use them not only for yourself, but also for your team, well, then you absolutely came to the right place. I'd say it took me about 2 years to summarize 82 years of motivation science, anything that has ever been written on motivation, into these 8 pieces of work. They represent our 8 human motivators, and with just 8 questions, you can get to know them more in depth. In today's workshop, we're going to find you your top 3 motivators, your top 3 pieces of work, and then we're also going to define one next action you can take to boost your motivation most. Once you've done that, you'll be joining 350 people that came before you. And actually, after SuperNova, that number now stands at 430 plus people. But why are we doing this? Why are you here listening today to this talk about motivation? Well, obviously, you want to know a bit more about your personal motivation, and potentially you also want to use it for your team. But we actually have a much bigger thing at play here, people. We're currently going through a huge crisis, ladies and gentlemen, and that is a crisis of eyebrows. We have an eyebrow crisis. Now, to make my case, I need to take you through 3 more numbers. They are on the slide. They are 0.5, 2, and x. And I'm going to need your cooperation for this, okay? So here's the deal. I'm going to be asking you 3 questions, and they have something to do with these numbers. And I'm going to have to ask you to answer these questions out loud. The first thing that comes to your mind. So even if you're just sitting by yourself somewhere in an office or in a car, and you're like, I'm just going to listen, I'm not really going to answer, it's not going to work. I'm not going to be able to make my case. So please answer the first thing that comes to your mind out loud, and then I'll be able to make my case for the eyebrow crisis. So this is going to go fast, okay? I'm going to be asking a question, and it's going to be question, answer, question, answer, question, answer. Yeah? You ready? Are we good to go? All right, let's do it. First question, what's your name? Second question, what's your favorite color? Third question, what motivates you most in your work? Now, this is the point where in the SuperNova presentation, we had a bit of laughter. And if everything went right, you also had a specific experience right now. Being the first 2 questions you answered quite easily. Third question, there was a blank. And what just happened there? So let me walk you through that. So with the third question on the motivation, this is where the eyebrow crisis hits us. This is where we either lift them up into the sky, these eyebrows, and then sometimes a big inhale accompanies them, and you're like, oh, I don't know. And your mind just goes blank. Or you go into a big frown and you're like, oh, I had this meeting this week. I didn't like that meeting. But I was also working on that task and I did like that one. And then I have this colleague and he or she is really nice. And so you start contemplating all these different options. But at the end of the day, you're still unsure about what to answer, what motivates you most in your work, in a couple of seconds. And this is the eyebrow crisis, people. This is an X because I currently do not have the specific statistics on how much seconds it takes us to answer that question. But I can assure you, ask anyone what motivates you in your work, and you're going to see the eyebrow crisis immediately right there, right then, in front of your eyes. A statistic that I can share is that in Gallup's report on worker retention, motivation, and engagement of 2023, They looked into the people that classify as engaged at work. How much % of the workforce would that be? The answer was 23%. That's incredibly low. And so this is why the eyebrow crisis, the Gallup research, these things are important today. We need to have a look at what motivates us, and we need to make it easy. Now you could be telling me, sure, but those first two questions, they were much easier to answer than that third question. You were comparing two things that can't be compared. Well, then let's have a look at why they were so much easier. First question about your name. You answered that in 0.5 seconds. That's the number that's on the slide. Why did it go so fast? Well, that's because your name has been the same for as long as you can remember, and it's probably going to stay the same for the rest of your life. So it doesn't change. That makes it so easy to answer that question. But for motivation, the third question, that's not the case. Motivation does change over time. That's one of the first difficulties. Then the second question about color. Your favorite color may change over time. And it took you about 2 seconds to answer that question. So why is it that you could quite easily still answer that question, even though your favorite color may change over time? Well, that's because we have this list of basic colors, right? And then we have some variations on that list. So if you want to change your color, you know where to start. You just go to the list, you have a look, and you're like, okay, this is my new favorite one. And that's a big difference with the third question on motivation once again. Motivation is quite vague. There is no list. So motivation changes over time, and there's no list to start from. Or is there? Because obviously we wouldn't be having this talk if potentially there wasn't a list of motivator, if potentially there wasn't a list, a menu of motivators. Imagine like in a restaurant, you enter the room, you go and sit down, you get a menu in front of you, and then you have a look at all the options and you're like, this one, this is the most important one to me, or this is my favorite. And then you use it to open up the conversation in the restaurant with your waiter, or in a company context with your manager or your colleagues. So let's have a look at that menu, right? We already briefly touched upon it in the very beginning, but let's have a look a bit more in depth what they all specifically mean. The first one was the P of pay. This is everything that has to do with your remuneration, your salary, your compensation. The second one is the P of progression. This is your growth, your learning. The third P is the P of prestige. This is where your appreciation comes in, your reputation. Then we have the P of people. This is about your colleagues, the team, your management. Fifth P is the P of product. This is about the value you add, the impact you have. I often get asked the question, where is purpose in your list of motivators? Well, it's right there, under the P of product. The sixth P is a P of personal. This is everything that has to do with your personal values, your personal home situation, and your personal health. The seventh P is a P of policy. This is order, hierarchy, structure, the policies of your company. And then finally, we have the P of power, which is about your autonomy. Now, we've established that we have an eyebrow crisis, and we have established that we have a potentially solving the eyebrow crisis, the menu of motivators. But what we haven't established yet is why I'm the person talking to you about this. And so this is the point in the presentation where I was showing a picture of myself presenting one of the very first 8 piece of work presentations a couple of years ago. At the time, I was a consultant. I was in data visualization and reporting. I worked for the Flemish government and also for ArcelorMittal. Being in data may explain why I thought it was an interesting idea to summarize all the data that we have on motivation science into this new categorization. And I also have then, after that, I had a background in large-scale change and transformation management that was mostly in the financial sector. Now, that picture looked pretty cool, but what you couldn't see in that picture is that I was actually not doing very well at the time. And that's because I just came back from a bore out. It's what happens when you get chronic boredom in your job, and it gets so bad that at one point you also need to go home and take a break. Now, when that was resolved, I came back to work. And resolved is a big word because things like that take time. When I came back to work, though, my company was so generous enough to give me the opportunity to share my lessons learned with the rest of the organization. And so that's what I did. I also presented to them the first pieces of research on the 8 Ps of work. And then something very interesting happened. Before we knew it, it got picked up by the University of Antwerp, University of Brussels, Projective Group, BIX, which is a subsidiary of Proximus, the Mindshift Festival, and Excelis. And currently, I'm pivoting my career for this. I am going from consultancy into this 8 Ps of work. Why? Because the more we're talking with people leaders, the more we're talking with HR, the more we're talking with managers, the more excited we're starting to get, the more curious we're starting to get. And why? Because we're imagining what would happen if you could create a team that has people in there with similar motivators, similar drivers, but diverse skill sets. You would come awfully close to the holy grail of the high-performing team. And obviously, a lot has been written and tried and researched on the high-performing team, and we haven't cracked the code just yet. But what if this is the missing piece of the puzzle? How cool would that be? Now I'm getting ahead of myself, and we've talked a little bit about the potential of the future. I've explained to you a bit about the past, but what do you think we just try it out? Let's go back to the present, and let's have a look at how we can decode your motivation for yourself right here today. There's a QR code on the screen. You can scan that one. If you're currently in the car, I will walk you through all of the instructions, so don't worry about that. And then once you've scanned that, you will be taken to the starting page of the 8 Ps of work test, the 8 Ps of work workshop. Once you hit start, there's the option to add in your name. For data privacy purposes, if you want to add a pseudo, that's completely fine. Your data is not used for anything. So for the people following along, you can do that right now. And then once you filled out your name, we're going to assume that you're currently preparing for your next one-on-one. Okay, so your next one-on-one with your +1 is somewhere next week, and you want to boost your motivation. So that's the starting position that we get from. So here's what we're going to do. In step 1, we're going to define your 8 Ps of work, your motivators for you specifically. And in a second step, we're going to find you your top 3 Ps, your top 3 motivators. And then finally, in a third step, we're going to define the one next action you can take to boost your motivation most. The next screen that comes up is the first P of work. It's the P of pay. And it shows you 3 options that you can choose from. Now, those 3 options, those are categories. Anything that has been written on the P of pay in the literature has been categorized in 3 options. And these options also have brackets. So you have, for example, a reliable inflow of cash is one of the options. And then between brackets, it says salary, meal vouchers, and the 13th month, which are examples of practical applications in the workplace. So this is the part where companies could add something between brackets. We're going to go quite fast through this. There is more in-depth versions of this workshop available, but for now, for time reasons, and this is also how we did it on SuperNova presentation, we're going to do it like that. So for the people who have it on the screen, you can right now just indicate the P of pay definition that is most important to you. If you're listening along, I'll quickly sum up the 3 categories, and then you can think with me the one that would be most important to you. So we have 3 options here. Number 1 is a reliable inflow of cash. Number 2 is an ability to save, and the examples here were pension, stock, and the company bonus. And then the third option is performance-based pay with the examples of a variable salary and a personal bonus. Once you've indicated that, you are taken to the second screen, which is the P of progression. This is everything that has to do with your learning, and you can once again indicate what is most important to you. We have 4 options here. I'll quickly sum them up. First one being the mastery of a subject with the examples of, for example, certificates and the ability to teach. Second, learning by structure. Examples are a training program, a clear promotion path. Third option would be learning by curiosity. Examples are a free training budget and function rotations. And then the fourth option is a reasonable pace of learning with the example of a healthy growth out of your comfort. So once again, here you would be thinking about which one would be most important to me. You indicate it. And then we move on to the third P of work, which is the P of prestige. This is everything that has to do with your reputation and how you want to be appreciated. 4 options here. I'll quickly sum them up. First one being building a role. Examples are an adequate title, responsibilities, a brand. Second option is recognition for work done. Examples are private or public appreciation. Third option being leading other people. Examples are guiding a team that reports to you. And then the fourth option is competitive or gamified environments. And the example is a win or lose dynamic. Once you've indicated what's most important for you there, we move on to the P of people, which is the fourth one. And this is everything that has to do with your colleagues. There's 3 options here. First one being a feeling of belonging and acceptance. Examples are who's in your team and psychological safety. Second option being what is being surrounded with A players in leadership and peers. Examples are competence and respect. And then the third option is working in small teams or solo, and the example is the size of your team. Next up is the P of product. When it comes to your impact, 4 options. What is most important to you? Option number 1, using your personal strengths to create impact. Example is your path to Ikigai. Second option being contributing to a larger mission. In between brackets stands company vision and service to the world. And then the third option is contributing to a team that needs your help, with the example between brackets, direct impact in a team. And then finally, the first option is empowering a team to deliver impact. Between brackets, the example is direct impact on a team. And then we move on to the P of personal, the 6th P, when it comes to you personally. 4 options. First one being my physical health, so your physical health, with examples between brackets, health insurance, having 0 pain, exercise, sleep, food, and your hormones. Second option, your home and family. Between brackets, the examples are life insurance, housing, kids, and love. Third option is your mental health. In between brackets, the examples are stress, inner calm, self-worth, and confidence. And then finally, honoring your values as the fourth option, with the examples of your personal values and the degree of which you carry a professional mask. Then we have the 7th P, the P of policy. The categories that come under this P are 3. So the first one is an ability to rely on existing policies, structure, and rules. Examples are order, hierarchy, DEI, CSR. Second option being safe and comfortable working conditions. In between brackets stands the company car, access to public transport, office location, remote work, and travel. And then the third option is the culture of how decisions are made. And the example is fairness of policy applications, prioritization, and intrapreneurship. And then finally, we have the 8th P, the P of power, which is about autonomy. And here you have, once again, 3 options. You can choose from the first one being independence, ability to make your own decisions. In between brackets, the examples are control over your time and resources, review of your work, ease of taking time off. Second option being the ability to influence your environment. In between brackets is the pace of getting things done, co-creation of your work package, part-time. And then thirdly, having ownership over project or team. In between brackets stands the freedom in guiding something you're responsible for. So for the people listening, this went quite fast. For the people following along and doing the test, this is the point where you get an overview of the definitions that you chose. So right now, ideally, you have a bit of an idea of what your specific definition is per P of work. And that means that we have our ammunition to go on to step 2. For the people that are currently following along in a car or not having access to a screen, I hope you kind of remember what each of these P's could mean for you. This is the point where you choose your top 3. I'm going to repeat them one more time. And just keep in mind what you had earlier in your head of what that definition for you was potentially in there. So the 8 P's of work, one more time, are pay, progression, prestige, people, product, personal, policy, and power. If 3 of them for you are currently the most important and you come up with those, you just indicate them either in your head or if you're following along with the screen in the workshop in the app. So that was step 2. And then finally, we go to step 3, where we make it actionable. Because right now we have defined the definitions of our 8 pieces of work. In a second step, we have chosen our top 3. And now we're going to have a look at how we can make this practical. From your top 3, you're going to have a look at what P currently has the biggest opportunity for improvement for you. So this is super individual. This is super practical. And in the case that you, for example, chose progression, people, and product, you're just going to have a look at which one of these 3 currently has your biggest room for improvement. And then once you've done that, imagine, for example, you took the P of people. You have a look at, okay, in my current context, within my zone of control, what is one next action that I could take or propose to boost my motivation most today? And then you take that action with you to your next one-on-one, to your next feedback moment, and then you open up the conversation about it. For the people currently filling it out, you can leave your email if you would like to receive your results. This is completely anonymous. Your data will further not be used, so you can leave that. Or if you do not want to leave your email, you can just skip it and move along. And then we get to the end screen of the 8 piece of work test, which says thank you and then your name. Your number 1 motivator today is, and then you can fill that out. Now, before you go, there's one more favor that I would like to ask you. And that is that we resolve that eyebrow crisis. Right here on the screen, we have one more time those 3 numbers, 0.5, the 2, and then that X. And let's just go through those 3 questions one more time, okay? First question, what's your name? Second question, what's your favorite color? And then third question, what's your number 1 motivator today? Et voilà, amazing. Now you are able to answer that question much more easily. So thank you for listening. Thank you for following along with the 8 piece of work. If you have any questions, any requests, any feedback, feel free to connect@ocho.co or Aurélie Cécile Rosette on LinkedIn. I'll be more than happy to hear you out. Thank you very much. Enjoy the rest of your day and speak to you soon.